I'll just ask you to be patient with us for another couple of minutes. We have one more board member that we expect to be present. We start the meeting promptly at 5:15. We do have a quorum in the event that we need to proceed at 5:15. If she's not here, we'll go ahead and dismiss her. All right, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the August 2nd, 2022 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Appeals Zoning. Present here today are Allison Grass, Robin Richards, John Bennett, Bill Goodwin, Kathy McKay, all board members, and myself, Jeff Tibbles, I'm the chair. We do also have from the zoning staff, Lee Batchelder, Penny Ashby, and Omar Muhammad. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak identify yourself for the record, please. We will conduct this meeting in the usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do three things. Number one, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Number two, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And number three, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of the members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, The authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. First of all, I'm going to ask if any one of you intends to speak this evening, that you raise your right hand, and I'm going to ask you to give an oath that you'll be truthful in what you say. If you intend to speak, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You signify by saying, I do. All right, the first item on our agenda is item A1, review of the minutes of the July 19, 2022 board meeting. And we've received those minutes from the city planning staff. Do I hear a motion on those? All right, move for approval. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, move for approval. Second, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. The minutes have been approved. I'm sure you think that. I believe it was Mr. McKay made the motion, seconded by Ms. Grass.
Thank you.
Item section B, new applications. Item 1 under B, 1316 Julian Clark Road, Clark's Point, PMS number 42605000016. Request variance for section 54-301 to allow a two-story detached accessory building with a 5-foot west side setback and 5-foot rear setback to allow an HVAC platform with a 5-foot west side setback, 9 feet, 25 feet are required. So under SR1, owner applicant Carter and Suzanne Bagley, Mr. Batchel.
This property is located in a neighborhood on James Island. It's a neighborhood off of Dills Bluff Road. Most of the properties in the neighborhood are not in the city. This has a few properties, this grouping, that are located in the city of Charleston. The rest are in the town of James Island. And the zoning map illustrates that. You see the subject property there in the middle. The properties across the street on either side, and one of the adjoining properties behind it are not in the city. They're in the town of James Island. And then you've got another property right behind it that is in the city. However, the best I can tell, the large accessory building that sits in the back of that house was built prior to that property being annexed into the city, the record that I've seen. So we're dealing with a property that has a single-family residence on it. And the application is seeking the board's approval to construct. It's listed as a 2-story detached accessory building on their agenda. It's actually 1 story. It's elevated off the ground to meet flood zone requirements. So here is the aerial view of the photo of the property. You see the house and the pool in the right rear corner of the property. And the proposal is to place a accessory building over in this corner of the property, so the left rear corner. And there was actually an application for this property that came before the board some time ago, and that was approved, but the applicant has changed those plans, and so it has to come back before you in order to receive a new approval for that accessory building. So this is the application and the materials that were submitted with it. The variance test. This is the approval that was granted last year, June of last year. And this is the approval showing a building, accessory building that was going to be located 3 feet off the side rear property line. You can see in this sketch that it was not going to be very far off the ground. But anyway, the flood zone requirements for this property are such that they have to elevate a few more feet. And these are just some other photographs that he submitted. photographs of that back corner of the property. This is the other corner where the pool is located. And he's got a little storage shed in that back corner. But this illustrates the new site plan, and the footprint would be 5 feet off of the side and rear property line. And the HVAC unit that will be placed on a stand, that stand will be located 5 feet off the side property line. Right over here. Hard to see, but that's the stand. So these are the drawings for that proposed building. And this shows in more detail how he proposes to elevate the building to meet the flood zone requirements. And it would have a loft space above the ground level. And so it occurred to me that I think, and this is a little bit unusual to have a building situated this way, accessory building situated this way. So that is the reason for the variance request to the 9-foot side setback requirement, 25-foot rear setback requirement that applies to the property. But it occurred to me that really we ought to be, I think, consistent with this property and how the town of James Island views these kinds of buildings, because most of the surrounding properties are in the town of James Island. I thought it makes sense to be fair to this property owner and treat it the same way. So I did find that the rules in the town of James Island allow accessory buildings to be up to 25 feet in height. This building is proposed to be a little over 23 feet in height to the ridge of the roof. But they require buildings of this size to be set back off of the side and rear property line, a minimum of 5 feet. So that's why the applicant moved it from 3-foot setback to 5-foot setback. And I think that's a reasonable request with the situation that's developed over the years. We used to be able to annex property on James Island, grow the city limits, but when the town formed, that stopped us from being able to annex any of those properties because they are now a separate municipality. And so the boundaries that are shown on that map, the city properties that are in the city of Charleston, and the remainder of the properties being in the town of James Island, I think are pretty much set. I don't think those boundaries will change anytime. Even the distant future, probably. But so I felt like it was probably reasonable to apply those town's rules, and the rules, their rules are not that dissimilar to what we have. It's just unusual to have a building situated like this with a elevated floor, an accessory building situated like this. So for those reasons, I'm supportive of the variance request and feel like they have a case for the variance.
All right, thank you, Lee. Is there anybody here who's in opposition to the application of Julian Park Road? If you're here to oppose that application, please just raise your hand. All right, nobody is here in opposition. Did we receive any letters?
Yes, I'm sorry. So the applicant did obtain letters from the neighboring property owners indicating that they have no objections to this request. So we've got a letter from 1333 Julian Clark Road, 1944 Leah Avenue, and I think that's that's the street behind you, right? 1310 Julian Clark Road. So those are letters from the adjacent property owners who don't object.
And Mr. Bagley, you're here. Are you, do you have anything you'd like to add to what Mr. Batchelor said?
No, just to include the height with the variance. That was something that kind of slipped last time and it illustrated, perfectly last time. But now that we've gotten some plans drawn, that was kind of why I've kind of come back after I tweaked the plan. That was all, but Lee and Dave done a great job.
All right. Any of the board members, do you have any questions for the applicant? Do I hear a motion?
Move for approval.
Second. All right, Mr. Bennett's moved to approve the variance request, seconded by Ms. Robbins. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. The motion passes unanimously. The variance is granted for agenda item B1, 1316 Julian Clark Road. I am going to have to recuse myself for agenda items B2 and B4. In the meantime, I'm going to tell you that item B3 has been deferred. B3 has been deferred. If you're here to speak in support or opposition to B3, Clements Ferry Road, requesting a special exception to a warehouse self-storage facility by Daniel Island SS LLC, has been deferred.
Agenda item B2, Jack Farness Road, TMS number 26800000176. Request special exception under section 54-206R to allow use of site for outdoor laydown guard equipment storage for proposed Dominion Electric operation. Zone LI, owner Callister Timmons, Clements Ferry LLC, applicant Dominion Energy, South Carolina, Inc. Mr. Batchelor.
So this is a light industrial zone property. And in the light industrial zone, you can have these outdoor laydown yards, but it does require the board's approval for zoning special exception. This is section 54206R, and it states that outdoor storage yards, which are used for the storage of materials and equipment other than vehicles, boats, shipping containers, or shipping containers, are permitted within the light industrial and heavy industrial districts as an exception where the board, after review, finds that adequate provision and maintenance of visual screening by fences, planting, or other means from public streets, roads, residences, and adjacent residential zone districts will be provided. I don't think the second one is really applicable because this is not a junkyard, scrapyard, or an auto salvage yard. So that doesn't apply. That is the special exception test for the board tonight. The property is located, it's a piece of this overall tract of land, which is on the Cainhoy Peninsula. This is Clements Ferry Road right down here. And property is located back here, so it's the rear portion of this larger tract of land. This is Jack Primus Road right here that provides access out to Clements Ferry Road. There's a zoning map just illustrating the location of that piece of property. It's zone light industrial, as are the properties that surround it on two sides. And then there's a residential neighborhood that's back behind this property at the end of Jack Primus Road that is not in the city of Charleston, but it's a long-established residential area off of Jack Primus Road. This is the application. So this is an explanation that the applicant provided because as you can see from the zoning map, the neighboring properties, I guess would be to the southeast and to the southwest are industrially zoned properties. So those are no residential uses there, and there's large wetland areas and other things that help to screen and buffer this property from those areas. And you've got Jack Primus Road over here. There is some industrial land on the other side of Jack Primus as well. But they do have a buffer along Jack Primus Road that they will incorporate into their plan. But then you've got this boundary of the property that abuts that residential area back here. So this is an explanation from the applicant about how they're going to address that one side, and I've highlighted the wording that addresses that one side. So the north side borders St. John's Church Road and multiple residential properties. The site shows a proposed 50-foot buffer between the residential properties. Additionally, there is a 1.1 acre wetland area that is not developable and will provide an additional buffer from the residential properties. Nearest storage yard on the proposed plan is approximately 250 feet from the rear property line on these residential properties. And then Dominion, who is will be using this yard, will fence the entire operations. They propose plantings in all buffers and along the fence lines to provide additional screening from the public. Landscape planting plan will be submitted to the City of Charleston Technical Review Committee. The attached exhibit provides buffer areas, green space areas, and wetland areas that will provide buffers adjacent to the adjacent properties. So this is an aerial view, and you see the industrial uses that are nearby and along Clemensburg Road. And you'll see this area in the back, which has St. John's Church Road. That is the residential area. Here's a direct overhead aerial view. And you see the scattering of houses and other houses over here along the back side of this property. Area map shown here. And the overall site plan, and the applicant can explain this if you want more information about it, but you see these large wetland areas that on all sides of the property. So those are obviously not going to be developed. They'll remain wetland areas, and there's even a bald eagle's nest, I think is what this is. It limits what they can do back here in that area. But this is the plan, the illustrated plan that they provided that he refers to in that correspondence that I've read. And so you see in the red the buffer areas that will be provided and maintained for this yard. So these residential properties will have a large buffer area here shown in red with some supplemental planting. And then there'll be planting this area as well along along that street, St. John's Church Road, I think it is. This is a blow up of that. So you see the buffer areas located here. And then you see also the areas that they are proposing to use within this property. A lot of it is over here on the left side where you're not close to any residential properties. More views. Again, a close-up aerial view of that particular area of the property. This it's also important to note that this property has been looked at for a variety of uses, and prior to this, there was a plan to develop it for residential uses back here, and that didn't work out for whatever reason, and so the property is available, and I guess it works well with plans for Dominion and their need to expand their operations in that part of the city. So that concludes the presentation for me. I think that they've addressed the special exception test that is applicable to this request. And we're not aware of any objections or concerns from anybody with this application. And the applicant's here if you'd like to ask them some questions about it.
The city's recommendation is for approval. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition? Being none, are there any, is the applicant present who wishes to add anything?
I'm Trey with Edward Engineering. Here to answer any questions along with the team.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I'd like to know if you met with the community that surround that area that's going to be affected.
I have not personally met with the community.
Brian, still trying to I have not met with anyone as of yet.
Kind of along those same lines, I had a question about the church. Did you meet with the AME church, or do you feel like that buffer is substantial enough with that church that's right in the more narrow?
So the church itself is across St. John's Road, and that's SCDOT right away, so it's on the other side of the road. We do have a buffer along that road. Additionally, there's a 50-foot buffer along our residential properties, and it gets to as large as 250 feet because of the wetland in that area. So at the back of those residential properties, we're approximately 250 feet from the back property line of the residential properties.
So essentially, it's not going to be visible, is what you're saying, from those properties or the church.
That's correct. So there's already a natural buffer with
Right.
wetlands there that we can't develop at all. We can't touch that area. The area closest to the residential properties, there is upland there that will have a 50-foot buffer that we will plant because we're going to plant to screen additionally in that area. So with that distance, 250 feet from the back of the property lines, they should not be able to see inside the back of our property.
What type of fencing are you using?
We've got various options.
Okay.
That we can use. We do want to use an area to protect that sort of thing. So we use various methods. You may be aware of the other facility that we also built in West Nashville, up on Sac Road that we were placing there. So it would be a similar type to that. We don't take a lot of elements from that design and incorporate it into this.
Mr. Batchelder, will that still go through the technical review committee as the next phase, the design
This project,
for this project?
yes.
As far as a traffic study, did you do a traffic study to determine what the impact would be on the road coming in? I noticed there's an entrance, and I'm assuming that the residentials use that same area to get there, the residential homes. Has there been a traffic or impact study on the road, on access, the number of cars, pollution, any of those kinds
So
of
there will be, because we have to go to the city technical review committee. So as part of the technical review committee review, we're required to submit a traffic study due to the size of this project. So we will be hiring a third-party engineering firm to do that study when we go ahead and submit at the next level.
The internal road is not there. So the Jack Primus Road over here is the access point for the neighborhood, but this interior road is not there today.
Right.
Would you go to the one that shows the actual topography?
That one? or-
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, there was one that has the overlay.
That one.
Yes. Thank you.
Does that neighborhood have a neighborhood association?
I'm not aware of any organized neighborhood association in that area.
When you go through the letter files, I did see letters for or against it, and we could post the site. Is that correct?
Yes.
Motion. Questions?
I've got some concerns about not speaking to the neighborhood. It's a large project.
Well, if it's the inclination of the board, we can certainly, defer it and ask that the applicant make that contact.
I think that would be wise, because when we start talking about even the fencing, what type of fence, different things like that, I think neighborhood input, just to have some involvement might work for everyone. I think everybody feel a little bit better about it than to see it just happen without any discussion.
I agree with you, and I would also ask that the church be included since they're so close.
They seem like they're closer, they're almost more impacted than the residential. I agree with that.
Would you like to state a motion?
Yes, a motion, I would like to make a motion for referral to have some time to speak to the impacted properties if they don't have a neighborhood association, to speak to the community about it.
Is there a second?
Second.
A second. So the motion is for deferral to allow the applicant an opportunity to speak with the neighboring residents and church adjacent to the property. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. The motion is for deferral is approved by unanimous vote.
Mr. Chairman, question regarding that. I'm Nicole Scott, I'm the clerk with the meeting. Is that a deferral to a time certain, or how do we notify you that we're ready to get back on the agenda?
I believe you coordinate that with Mr. Batchelder.
Right.
Okay, just let you know. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
The next agenda item is item B3, which has been deferred. Item B4, 180 Trad Street, Charlestown neighborhood. TMS number 45707 and 4018. Request variance from section 54-301 to allow detached accessory structure carport loggia having a 9-foot side street setback and a 2-inch rear setback, 25 feet and 25 feet required, zone STR. Owner applicant Scott. Mr. Batchelor.
This is a residential property on the corner of Trad and Colonial Street. The house is facing Trad Street, but the application concerns the rear property line along Colonial Street. So you see on this map the 180 Trad Street property, and then to the north is what appears to be a vacant lot, and then a house. That vacant lot is actually the yard that goes with that neighboring house to the north. Here's an aerial view, and again, this is the yard to the north, that goes with this house on Colonial Street. And materials submitted by the applicant. So this is the existing condition. And there's a driveway that goes off of Colonial Street back here. And that is the one vehicular access into the property. This is a street view. I thought this was the best way to show that. But here's the gate, and then you see the driveway beyond the gate. It is at the very back of the 180 Trad Street property. And then the neighboring yard here that goes with this house. This is the proposed site plan. And what they are proposing to do is build this carport loggia addition to their property, the very back of the property. So it's listed as a 2-inch rear setback. It basically abuts the wall on the neighboring property. And you'll see how they've designed it to minimize any impact to the neighbor. So again, this is a close-up view, carport for two-car garage, two cars, and then this loggia here. And the issues are the setback along the rear property line and the setback off of Colonial Street. Normally, accessory buildings are required to be set back 25 feet, but they are proposing to have it up at the street. And of course, this is in the BAR's jurisdiction, so the design, location, that sort of thing will be scrutinized by the board as well. Another view showing the proposal, and these are the elevations. So from Colonial Street, this is the view. Actually, this would be the view from Colonial Street. So you see the wall for the property, and then the gate, and there'll be this roof structure that extends back from that point. Actually, it is set back a little ways. I see here. Okay. So it is set back off the wall a little bit, but 1-story carport loggia addition, and this is the view from the neighboring property right here. And the applicants have spoken with that neighboring property owner, or chair of this board. And they have a letter from him indicating that they have been provided with the plans for the garage that he hopes to build near the northern property line at the corner of Trad and Colonial Streets, and that they have reviewed the plans and do not object to the design location of the proposed structure. We hope that the city will look favorably upon our good neighbors' proposal. So they have the support from the neighbor who was immediately impacted by this request. I think in view of the conditions, and I should point out that the setback from the side street is actually not 0. It's actually what's listed here, which made it onto the agenda, which is 9 feet. So the building footprint is what's shaded here. Building footprint, which is 9 feet off that side property. It doesn't come right up to the street line. So I think they've met the requirements for a variance to allow this structure, and in light of the conditions that they have on this property, and certainly there's no adverse impact on the neighbor who doesn't object to this. So I recommend approval of this request. BAR again will have its opportunity to scrutinize it as well.
Mr. Batchelor, the city's recommendations for approval. Any letters of opposition?
No,
Is there
no letters of opposition. No.
anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition? Is the applicant present? Are there, would you like to speak with him?
I'm Russ with the Chief of Oil Architects, here on behalf of Scott Clark. Actually couldn't make it.
portion. Are there any questions from the board? Do I hear a motion? And then the motion is for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
May I verify the motion, please, was made by Ms. Richards and second by Mr. McKay? Thank you.
The motion is approved unanimously.
And the final item on our agenda this evening is B5, 546 Hugie Street, Hampton Park Terrace, TMS number 460-02-04-049. Request variance from section 54-301 to construct a single-family residence with a 4-foot west side setback, a 13-foot total side setback, 9 feet and 15 feet of required, zone DR1F. Owner applicant Robert Todd Sloan. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a vacant lot in the Hampton Park Terrace neighborhood, situated between Kenilworth and Elmwood Avenue. Here you can see the vacant lot on the zoning map. And you also will notice that the houses are situated very close to one side property line, if not on that side property line. That's very typical of the neighborhood. And so notice that this lot is matching in size to the other lots in that block on Hugie Street, across the street and on the same side of the street. So very typical lot. Here is an aerial view of the property. Some materials that were submitted, and then I've added this Google Street View just to help illustrate the issue. So setback requirements for this lot, zoning ordinance, are 3 feet on the east side, which is the right side of the property, and 9 feet on the west side. And then the total side setbacks have to equal or be greater than 15 feet. So one or both of those side setbacks has to be wider than the minimum. So that would be the typical arrangement. You typically would site a house closer to the east side property line rather than the west side. And I think that's fairly typical in this neighborhood, although it's not followed. That rule is not followed by every neighborhood. In this case, that would present a problem for them because of the location of this really large street tree right here, and the power line pole right here. So if they were to do that, they would have their driveway coming out over here. It would impact the street tree and create a difficult situation, probably unsafe as well, with trying to back out of the driveway onto Hugie Street. So what they're proposing to do is basically flip those setbacks so that the wider side yard is on the east side, narrower side yard is on the west side, and then have the driveway over on this side of the property. In plan view, it looks like this. So house is situated 4 feet off of the west side property line, and then 11 feet off of the east side property line, and then they need variance for the total. Actually, they don't need the variance for the total. Well, this shows 11 feet. I know it's 9 feet here, but the house is actually 11 feet off the side property line. Right. So they meet the 15-foot requirement with this proposal. And that gives them a nice wide driveway on this east side of the property to connect to Hugie Street, and provide the required parking for the house. And view, so this is the proposed design, 2-story house. And you see, and I should also point out that this house on the west side or the east side of their lot is located right up close to that neighboring adjoining property line. So either way, they've got a situation where they would impact one of the houses, depending on which side they put that house on. So anyway, they're proposing to have it this way because of the tree, like power pole. That makes absolute sense. So, more information about the house. Go through if you want, but I think it's a very reasonable design for this lot. And they have contacted the neighbors. So this is neighbor at 550 Hugie, neighbor at 542, which is on the east side of this property, and the neighbor at 551 Hugie. And then this is an email from Kevin Everly, who writes that he's the secretary of the Hampton Park Terrace Neighborhood Association, and he writes that they meet only every other month, so there has not been a meeting since we learned of the variance request. Our next meeting will be in mid-August. However, the officers met last week. Among other things, had a request on this request on their agenda. He writes that we have discussed the matter and we can agree that there are no issues with the request for the four of us. But because they have not had a chance to have their neighborhood meeting or their membership meeting, they would defer to any concerns raised by immediate neighbors. Then this is a text exchange between the applicant and the owner's son, I guess, of the property next door on the west side, indicating that they would sign if they were here to sign. Document saying that they're fine with this. So I think they've done a good job of reaching out to the immediate neighbors, and these blue dots on these properties indicate the locations of the people who did sign the letters, and see the two most affected property owners here on both sides indicated they're fine with this. And we haven't heard of any objections or concerns from anybody. I think it's a very reasonable request for the variance given the circumstances that they have on this property that we think are unique to this property. So for those reasons, we recommend approval.
Thank you, Lee. And am I to understand that, based upon your presentation, that they only need a variance for the west side setback where 9 feet is required and the west
That is correct.
Okay. So, just make sure everybody's on the same page. The request is to grant the west side setback, which requires 9 feet, and it would be 4 feet under this plan. Do we have anybody here who's in opposition to the application B5 4546 Hugie Street? All right, do we have the applicants? Do you have anything you'd like to tell the board beyond what Mr. Batchelder told us?
Robert touched on this is completely my way, and thank you, Penny, for all the work. We talked quite a bit, and it was through, and we're excited to
All right, thank you. Anybody have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. Well, it's maybe for Lee, actually. Mr. Bachelor, does this still go through, are we still in BAR jurisdiction? Are we north of?
My question too, so even though it's a national historic, I know this doesn't, I'm just curious. Even though it's on the National Register, it doesn't? Okay.
No, if somebody is proposing to demolish or substantially alter one of the homes, existing homes, then yes, that would have to be.
Lee, has this lot always been a separately platted lot, or was it subdivided at some point? You know, if you don't know, that's fine.
I'm not sure. I don't remember if we ever looked at that or not.
I think that the neighbor to the west owned that lot.
Okay.
It was a separate lot and was used as a garden and grassy area and all of that for many, many years until they sold it. And then, you know, they kept the house to the west, sold that lot, and now this is where we are today.
And I think it is an original lot.
Yeah, I think it is
Based on
an
the
original
address
lot.
numbers, it looks like it. The
Yes.
address numbers.
I grew up in this area. I happen to know, well, not now, but knew all the neighbors that were from in that block. And those neighbors to the west that now live away. That's a little bit of information.
I believe it was 2013. So it's been a while.
Okay. So you didn't purchase it from the neighbor? Okay. All right, do I hear a motion?
Move for approval.
Move for approval by Ms. Grass.
I'll second that.
Kay seconds the motion. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. The motion passes unanimously. The variance for 546 Hughie Street as granted. Thank you, Mr. Mrs. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Your fingers.